And we're moving on to our second segment, talking about mental health awareness. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are joined by Krista Courtney. She's a counselor and the vice president of the Mental Health Association. Good morning, Ms. Courtney.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, yes. I suppose since we're having this segment, we should do a mental health check-in. How are we all doing? Yeah.
I'm pretty good this morning.
All right.
For
perfect.
a Monday.
For a Monday, in fact. Yeah, that's a good point. So we want to start things with the talk about mental health, of course. We are having an extra push this month when it comes to advocating for mental health. But I suppose my first question would be, do you think that aside from this month, we are talking about it enough?
Never. We're never talking about it enough. It's one of those things that has been, all of us have been affected. We all have mental health, whether it's ill mental health or healthy mental health. We all have mental health. Like we have heart health, like you have brain health, like you have cell health, muscle health, bone health, etc. So it's just another facet of ourselves that for a very long time we haven't really had open conversations around, but people have been affected silently for a very long time.
Yeah. One thing for me, when I think about mental health, I think about the generational gap when it comes to acknowledging the issues that come with mental health. Do you believe that the older generation are becoming more open to having that conversation?
That's a very generalized statement, and you know, some people are, some people aren't. It really just takes conversations to open it up, like with anything. When we needed to talk about difficult topics, awareness is key. Mm-hmm. The more aware you are of something, generally the less afraid you are of it. The less afraid you are of it, the more open it is for you to ask for resources, for you to reach out for help. I mean, you know that there's a cardiologist, so you go to the doctor.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know where to get help for their mental health. They don't even know that they're struggling with their mental health. They just feel this way. I can't shake it. Nothing I do helps. I keep trying to do this, but it's not working. Cycles are repeating in my life. I keep ending up in the same types of relationships. I'm treating my kids bad and I don't want to. I don't know how to do this. Can't get along at work. You know, you're just constantly having difficulties in their life and don't understand that it's highly likely that it's related to something internally that they're struggling with.
If one were to look at the landscape as it is, perhaps it can be argued that while there are conversations on mental health issues taking place either in the foreground or in the background, one could also argue that perhaps the powers that be aren't doing enough in terms of, one, raising the level of awareness that everyone should have where mental health is concerned. You mentioned earlier, some people don't even know where to access any kind of assistance dealing with these issues.
Yeah.
It's like you wake up one morning and you're depressed. You're not really sure what it is that's on your mind that's weighing you down. But who do you turn to? It's not as if though there is a facility or somewhere where you can go and seek that kind of an assistance. And that's on one side of the spectrum, if I could use that as a description. On the other side of it, on the extreme end of it, you see people who are walking around who are quote unquote crazy. I hate using that description,
mentally
but
ill,
they're mentally ill.
Have mental health issues.
Good.
Yes.
You have those people in our population, and everyone keeps asking, so where do we put them? Where do they go for help themselves? And I think a situation like that is simply because we're not educated enough to know who to turn to, where to go, where do we find acceptance if we all have a common issue that we could begin that conversation amongst each other. Where do we find that acceptance? Because the flip side of it is, whenever someone admits to having an issue, people start looking at them to stigmatize. And that's a huge part of it as well.
It is.
And so people are fearful to come forward with anything that's bothering them because they don't want to be looked at as different.
Right. And so stigma reduction is a big push among our mental health counselors and people who are working in the field. And I know that it's happening, conversations are happening in little silos, not necessarily big conversations.
Out in the open.
Right, out in the open. So Mental Health Awareness Month provides an opportunity to kind of push some of those conversations to the forefront in platforms like this that, again, just kind of assist to slowly and consistently disseminate the information so that people can recognize they have a problem and then understand where to reach out for help. So Mind Health Connect is another mental health advocacy organization that I work with as well, who have done a website. And so mindhealthconnect.com, the whole push behind it as part of advocacy and stigma reduction is to make sure that people privately can have access to figuring out where's the closest resource to my area. So it's broken down by district. And on the website, we're seeking to make sure that all of the information about mental health and wellness resources that are available in the country are listed there, so that people can figure out where they need to go, whether privately, publicly, hospitals, emergency rooms, etc. So that's one way that we're attempting to address that. Who do I turn to? Where do I go? Because we hear that a lot. I'm a professional in the field. My colleague Martine is also a professional in the field. There's several of us, and people, when they do get to us, what we hear a lot is, I had no idea this existed. I didn't know the service was here. So we're obviously, my company is on social media, Mind Health Connect is on social media, but again, you know, the push is as much as you can do, and we just have to keep pushing to widen that conversation for sure.
I was saying earlier that, and it's something that has crossed my mind on a number of occasions, that it would seem that for the most part, we're only reacting to certain things, at least from the point of view of the public that's not directly engaged with persons dealing with mental health issues, that we're only reacting to certain things.
But
certainly
you know,
in the media, that's the way it is portrayed.
But we're reacting because we see a part of the story and it touches us, and we say, man, this person needs help. And so you're having an emotional reaction to something that is clearly upsetting or disturbing, and you want somebody else to deal with it. Why aren't so-and-so doing this? Why isn't this person doing more? And we become experts on how to address it. Yes, it's still it's somebody else's problem, it's not mine. Now, I'm not encouraging people to become directly involved in a situation that you're not trained to address. However, how you advocate in your community, how you talk about these people in your homes, how you relate to them on social media. I mean, anything you see on social media is a piece of the story. Even the things that you see on the news often is a piece of the story. You know, and news people try to do the best that they can to provide the full story, but even that is really challenging sometimes. So we have high opinions. There are more things that we need to do, for sure. And advocacy continues to happen for government and for the powers that be, who have a little more authority over the health system and how it's organized, to ramp up this sort of mid-level type of support for people struggling with mental illness. We do have some support for people in acute crisis, but even that is not sufficient for the level of crisis that we often experience. And so while there is something in place, it absolutely needs to be augmented.
Based on your professional experience, what mental health issues have you seen persons being faced the most with?
That's a tough one, because people always present, you know, they come into the door because this is happening. When you look at this and you look a little bit deeper, a lot of it is trauma related. And so people who have had more than one adverse childhood experience, more than 4 or 5, things that happen in early childhood, not having enough support, and the adaptations that people make to accommodate for those situations, because we're humans and so we adapt to things, but we don't always adapt to things well. I mean, we adapt to survive, but sometimes then when you're safe, now I'm an adult, I don't need to do those things to survive anymore. the adaptations generally continue. But you don't really understand where you picked it up. You don't understand why you started to do that. And so individual therapy sometimes can assist you in pinpointing, oh, well, I don't need to do that anymore. Like, that's not working for me anymore. It worked for me then because that's all I had, but I don't need to do that now. Because even when you're safe and you're out of dangerous situations or unpleasant situations or situations that are emotionally injurious, you don't just heal and go back to being healthy. You have scar tissue, you have other things that if you don't know how to deal with it appropriately can continue to cause additional issues for you later on. Which is why people come in at 40 or 50 and they're like, this happened to me when I was 16, I haven't thought about it for 30 years and now I'm thinking about it every day, you know, and I can't get it out of my head. Because you can, a lot of people when they experience something painful, they immediately try to contain. And that's not bad, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's human, because your brain is always trying to help to protect you from splitting from itself in a way. So your brain does whatever it has access to. You don't really get to choose when something like that happens. And so the attempt to contain is a temporary solution for you to get more information, for you to emotionally process what's happening to you, for you to see what your next, because in the moment that it's happening, you don't have all those answers. You only have fragments of information. But
it's
then
almost like you're describing like dealing with grief, where like
grief is
in
a
some,
big one.
Yeah, in some cases we compartmentalize and we try to put that in the recesses of our mind.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
happened, they're
it
gone, I
comes
can't do
rushing back
anything
on
about
another
it.
time. Yeah.
For sure, absolutely. And you see it a lot. Like initially, people are like, oh, I haven't cried, I'm fine. You know, or the more answers you have, the more you understand the loss of someone, the easier it is to process. Not that it's ever easy, but you see less traumatic grief and less delayed or complex grief later on. So grief is a big one. But even, you know, losing a job, loss of a relationship, those are different types of grief that can be very traumatic depending on how it occurs. Understanding too that the initial attempt to contain then becomes suppression. And you just stuff it. And you can't talk about it, you can't hear a song anymore, you can't go to this place, you can't have certain triggers, whether it's grief or something else, right? A traumatic event, a robbery, or being assaulted, or something else. Certain smells then trigger it, and things like that. Your life just sort of shrinks, you know, and all of a sudden there's a lot of things you can't do. And when you continue to just suppress, you don't know how to bring it out and put it somewhere that it can live without disturbing you. It's like a landmine, you know, and sometimes going to seek professional help for something like that can assist you with deactivating that landmine. So we can't take the experience away from you, but we can certainly help you to reduce the disturbance that you feel as a relationship to it.
I want to touch on, and I mean, I know that as time goes by, we are speaking less and less about it, but I think it's also important to talk about the impacts of COVID-19 on our mental health. Have you seen more conversations about how that affected persons?
I'd like to see more conversations, but like anything, it just happened. We're still doing a lot of research in the field to try and understand. As a professional, we kind of can see things a little more easily sometimes because, again, we're seeing people who are in crisis. Social isolation had a big impact, right? But like with any crisis, whatever you're made of, that's what's going to come out. If you have resources, if you have good connection, you can survive it a little bit better than people that don't. Because even if your resource is limited, if you have good emotional support, you can survive a lot more than not having any and feeling very alone in that struggle. So families that had good connection and could do well generally fared a bit better. Those that didn't and don't tend to see a little more isolation, and it takes a long time sometimes, depending on your age, experiences, etc., to begin to re-engage in a meaningful way. And so some companies are still struggling because they're trying to decide, do we do hybrid? Do we let you work from home? Some people thrive working from home, some people don't. And each person's situation is very different. And I think companies are struggling to figure out, you know, which model works for everyone, but there isn't one that's going to work for everyone. It takes a lot of cooperation, takes a lot of communication, and trust.
Yeah. And so the Mental Health Awareness Month is important, where companies may have, missed the mark when it comes to really looking out for the mental health of their staff. Could you talk about the activities that you guys may have planned this month?
I'm not sure exactly what all is planned, and it's something that we're doing all the time, so I find it a little challenging. Mental Health Association, again, is been a long-standing organization that continues to advocate for policy change. They also are the primary support for the Welcome Resource Center, which is a daycare center for adults who are either mentally ill or homeless. It provides meals for them, showers, clean clothes, activities to engage with them during the day. Unfortunately, we don't have overnight care, but we're doing all that we can to try and continue to push these activities and again create awareness and funding, because everything takes money.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with political will at the end of the day. Because if I'm listening to you talk about the Welcome Resource Center and you're using descriptives such as daycare, and then at night or in the evening time they don't have anywhere to turn to, then that doesn't speak to the efforts being made privately, as it speaks on the efforts that should be made by the government of Belize to be able to establish facilities where people could access day or night regardless of what their immediate mental situations are.
Yeah, it's always challenging. The mental health conversation is increasing, and we continue, like I said, our advocacy work for that. So again, because the service that needs to be provided to persons who are struggling is so specialized, it is a huge financial line item.
Yeah.
And so it does have to be something that slowly the government will prioritize in the Ministry of Health, across ministries actually, because it is a multi-sectoral response that needs to be had. And so while you see persons in Ministry of Human Development doing certain things, and they're a lot more aware of on the ground sometimes what the struggles and difficulties are, the health model tends to focus medically, right? The social model tends to focus socially. But when it comes to mental health and how it affects a human being, it takes both approaches, and often that is what we do in our field. So you'll have a therapist, but if someone looks like they might need medication to assist them in participating fully in therapy and for symptom relief, we have to refer to a psychiatrist to get that recommendation, because we're not authorized to do that. But it's a team approach, and it really does take a team approach. And so the ministries have to communicate also with the Home Security and police and training. But all of those things need to work together. And that's a lot more challenging. It seems easy, but you need a lot of people, and you need a lot of people that are coordinated in their efforts. And so that's always a challenge.
All right, well, we're going to wrap things up. Is there any last words that you have in terms of the celebration of Mental Health Month?
I'd just say, it's important for you to personally decide to be an advocate. Someone that doesn't push away, but says, I wonder what would happen. Or to be more curious about mental health. There's lots of resources that you can read just to become more informed. You don't have to be a therapist, just to know that someone else's struggle is something I can't possibly speak on, but I could sit with you. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to have an answer. And I think that's the difference between talking to a friend or a family member versus talking to a professional. We're trained to carry this load with you. We're trained to know what to do. And so when you come and talk to a professional, we don't feel as helpless or hopeless or burdened in a sense. But you talk to your friend and they feel so bad for you and they just want to rescue you. They don't know what to do, and it feels heavy, or your mom or your sister. So I think it's just recognizing that you don't have to fix it, but be a listening ear and sit with somebody. And even something as simple as, I have no idea what to tell you right now. I'm just glad you shared that with me, and I'll sit here with you. And if it's really a problem and it's recycling itself, it keeps coming back, seek professional help. mindhealthconnect.com has a lot of those resources. And if there's any out there that we don't know about, please let us know.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ms.
Thank you
Krista
for having me
Courtney.
again.
When we come back, we will be joined by BCVI to talk about their summer camp. Don't go away.